set to conflict in the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and then the Islamic State.
Although sanctions may not have been terribly effective, we should absolutely not negotiate with a sporadic leader such as Kim Jong-un.
We need to find a different way to deal with the government without hurting the people and without further angering this government, which is highly unstable.
They get aggressive, we get aggressive. We've been doing that for 50 years, and it has brought no solution. We need to take a bold, paradigm-shifting move by incorporating them into the international economic community and changing the way that North Korea deals with the international community in that manner.
Time and time again, North Korea has had zero regard for international law, and we cannot incorporate them into the international community.
If we continue the sanctions without countries backing out of the sanctions, such as China continuing the trade, then those sanctions will damage the government.
By threatening North Korea with these measures, such as sanctions, we are pushing them further into the corner, and we do not know what violent actions they will take. Therefore, we need to use positive reinforcement to get their voices out there so we can hear what they want to bargain for. And that way we can reduce the violence in the region.
They just don't work. We are here solely for the reason that they have now carried out their 5th nuclear test since we've imposed these intense sanctions.
They will see the benefits of international trade as they themselves are not economically prospering at the moment.
The delegate of Uruguay urges caution in deciding what actions the government of the DPRK will take, seeing as we currently don't know the inner workings of the DPRK, and many of their decisions have been irrational.
18 million of their citizens are food insecure, or they are vulnerable to food shortages. 6 million of them need access to essential health services such as vaccine, medicine, hospital care. But the UN funding from 2014 to 2004 decreased from 300 million to 50 million. These dire humanitarian needs cannot be met with more economic sanctions.
In the past, there was a treaty signed by both the United States and Russia, and both programs, like this is after the Cold War, both programs were to deproliferate their nuclear arsenals. Russia did take immediate steps to do so, but after realizing that the United States did not take steps themselves, we ceased that program.
How do we know if they're actually demilitarizing?
That is why we send in investigators.
Would they be open to that?
Yeah. Right now, North Korea feels threatened. And since they're threatened, all they do is they spend all their budget to increase their nuclear arsenal.
After all this hostility, somebody needs to make the bold first move, and I think it should be us.
Ever since we imposed these sanctions, they have stopped coming to the six-party talks. These sanctions are doing things that are negative towards our relation with them, and thus we need to use positive reinforcement so that they know that we are willing to cooperate if they are.
They continuously break international law and do have zero regard for their people.
We need to find ways to get to the negotiating table. And I believe that using China to do so is a good option.
The Chinese are sending food. They're sending humanitarian aid. They are there to support the starving, the 80% of North Koreans who are food insecure. That's who you're hurting. You're hurting the North Korean people. You're not hurting Kim Jong-un. You're not bringing them to the negotiating table.
When we have found Chinese companies dealing with other violent groups such as ISIS, we have punished them, and we plan to do the same if we find out that we have groups inside of China having arms deals with North Korea.
Being isolated from China hurts North Korea far more than it does being isolated from any other world power.
This is actually not a humanitarian body. Arguably the United Nations is, but the Security Council, as the name might suggest, is actually not responsible for humanitarian action. So, though that's not to say it's not important to discuss in the larger scheme of things.
It is in the best interest of the citizens of North Korea that we allow the smuggling to continue so that they can have access to basic human resources such as food and clothing. So we need to find a solution that does not center around sanctions.
Sanctions don't work because people don't fully comply to the sanctions.
Smugglers are not going to abide by sanctions.
The Russian Federation and the United States had made an agreement that we were to send 3 terms to the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. These 3 terms being lowering sanctions that were proven to be harmful towards the North Korean people, reversing the Chinese trade to focus on solely providing humanitarian aid and not shipping in any technologies or weapons, and also the removal of offensive nuclear weapons systems in the Asian Pacific region that pose an immediate threat to North Korea so that we could bring them to the negotiating table, but still keep the defensive systems we have in place for the security of other members of the Asia-Pacific region. Thank you.
Would you accept NGOs or humanitarian aid organizations working to provide medical and food relief to your citizens?
We do allow the World Health Organization to access our country, and there's other organizations that we are willing to work with, such as organizations of the Chinese government. But in regards to other organizations which are allied with our enemies, no, that would be a security breach on our part, and it would not make any sense.
Let's say that all sanctions were taken off. The informal embargo that has been placed on your country was lifted. Would you then come and talk about non-proliferation at the six-party talks?
You just can't not have, quite literally stabbing us in the back and then trying to shake our hands with the other hand. It just doesn't work that way. We didn't break a treaty, we withdrew from it, which is our prerogative. Okay? The fact that we have developed nuclear weapons is the reason why we are still alive.
The delegate from North Korea, they couldn't even commit to eliminating their nuclear program if the rest of the world did as well. I think this is really concerning.
We must move into a future of non-proliferation, where no one has any nuclear weapons.
It does not make sense to say that we are going to eradicate all nuclear weapons in the world. That is unfeasible.
What good comes out of having these weapons of mass destruction, weapons that could end our world at a moment's notice?
North Korea is infamous for using deceit and trickery to advance their political agenda. How can we trust North Korea if we have zero transparency into what's going on in that country?
This last one is collective action.
So we're just telling China to
Collective
export some
action.
energy?
This body condemns the illegal smuggling of nuclear technology into North Korea. That's the second one.
Yes.
Raise your hand if you want to be a signatory on both.
Is this working paper the appearance that we want to give North Korea?
10 to 5, this communique passes and will be published shortly. So we've now passed 2 communiques representing the opinions of the council and the specific fighting members who supported the
I think that the reason we have a presence on the Korean Peninsula for our strategic reasons, and we would not be willing to give that up just for a chance to get North Korea to the negotiating table.
Motion to divide the question to clause by clause.
All those in favor of clause 1? This clause fails. All those in favor of clause number 2, please raise your placard now. Clause did not receive the required number of votes, so it does not pass. And finally, clause number 5. Your Honor. This clause number 5 passes. Good job, you guys.
Going and helping the rebel groups in Syria is the correct way to fight and combat ISIS, not through airstrikes.
And we must help these people escape this terrible situation.
And Venezuela, on the point of refugees, plans to take in 20,000 Syrian refugees and would like to ask the other countries to do the same.
Rebel groups, we don't know who they are. We don't know what their allegiances are. We can't safely provide them weapons and then know what they're going to do with them.
If the Syrian government were not to have to fight these rebels, they would be much stronger to take out ISIS and completely wipe it from the region.
The Syrian government has used chemical weapons against their own people. We cannot support that government. We must support the rebel groups in Syria and help them take their country back from the horrible dictatorship that they live in.
If we can get Assad to step down, we can help the rebels push out ISIS from their country and diminish their power within the Middle East.
But with all of our support, the Syrian government, backed by Bashar al-Assad and this committee, can effectively take down the Islamic State and then provide safety and places to live for the Syrian refugees.
We need to come up with stability. And if the rebel groups won't back down, and Bashar al-Assad won't back down, then we need to create a transitional government, which will be set up to fight ISIS for the time being.
ISIS is more powerful than the rebel group. If we take away the Syrian government, ISIS will fill the power vacuum, and they will control all of Syria.
We must support rebel groups and ground fighting and targeted airstrikes so as not to hurt any civilians.
If Bashar al-Assad wasn't able to stifle the rebel groups in his own country, then he sure won't be able to stop the Islamic State.
That is because the United States is funding them, giving them weapons, and forcing them to fight the Assad regime, which is why it is unstable in its current position. Before the civil war, the Assad government was very stable and could have defeated ISIS back then.
If we continue to support Bashar al-Assad's government, it's just going to be the same outcome as if ISIS were in power.
Bashar al-Assad has killed at least 191,000 of his own people. Those are his own people living in his lands. This is not somebody that we can back.
But when it comes to the people who live in Syria, I'm sure they much prefer a dictatorship to total anarchy and war. Thank you.
It's a fact that the Syrian people do not prefer dictatorship over anarchy and war because they were living under dictatorship and chose to go into war.
We must be realistic with our situation and show solidarity behind the Assad regime.
As a committee, we should try and work on a solution that will help stop ISIS get its revenue and money and supporters. We can agree on that.
We call upon the nations in this committee with larger military presences to help countries in North Africa fight off ISIS.
Social media campaigns are quite effective. They will definitely curb ISIS's support from the general population.
In the directive that we are currently working on, we will help Iraqi forces to take Mosul, the capital, but also encourage people to take in refugees that will be displaced from this fight.
Do you really think that a social media campaign is going to stop them from flooding to ISIS when they're flooding to ISIS not out of logical reasons, but out of discontent with their own lives?
Social media is actually a very powerful tool, especially for reaching the demographic that ISIS is trying to reach of young men between the ages of, say, 14 and 25.
It's an emotional decision. It's not a religious decision.
We need to put the impression on these young people that the Islamic State is losing, it's not a real Islamic group, and that there's just no reason to join. I just don't understand why we wouldn't fund these media campaigns.
Spain wants to know how you can be sure that precision airstrikes are not going to be harming innocent civilians, which is what we're trying to avoid.
The current missiles that the United States and Russia are using, if you give them a location, they will get within 5 meters of that location nearly 100% of the time.
Because isn't it just a special breed of people who are discontent with their own lives that go to join ISIS because they have no other option?
We are not only targeting people who are potential ISIS recruits, but also their communities, so that they will no longer be outsiders and will no longer feel the need to join ISIS.
ISIS actually pays more than the Iraqi government does to its staff per month. They support family members. It's a complicated financial organization. They take in about $3 million a day in funding, and it's a complicated organization with a CFO. We will be voting on the whole directive. Uruguay, how do you vote?
Yes.
United States, how do you vote?
Yes.
Russia, how do you vote?
Yes.
China, how do you vote?
Abstain.
In that case, considering abstentions as a changing of the quorum, which I believe is the correct procedure for a normal committee, this directive passes with 7 out of 11.
Obviously, in a perfect world, we wouldn't drop any cluster bombs. However, we have to think about how long and drawn out this war will be. And if eventually we have to use a cluster bomb, in this case or any other case, we want to have the option of doing that without going against the United Nations Security Council.
They're used on oil fields and other manufacturing facilities of ISIS.
If we're not able to use cluster bombs under any circumstance, as this communique suggests, then it doesn't necessarily give us all the necessary tools we need to fight the Islamic State.
No. No. It's a no for me.
Abstain.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This communique does not pass. All those in favor of Directive 1.1, please raise your placard now. All those opposed, or this directive passes, you may clap if you wish.
Venezuela has always been a strong supporter of the Kurds and wishes that their struggle for independence has not been so brutal.
If we take a very strong stance against the Kurdish people, they're very unlikely to help advance our interests in the region. So I would like this Security Council to consider a solution that neither angers the Kurds, Turks, or Iraqi people.
Although the Islamic State is not an actual country yet, it could be soon if we don't continue this fight, and we to fight them effectively.
This would result in Turkey withdrawing some of its support of our mission against the Islamic State, which would be catastrophic to this council.
They would now have their own country, which respects their values, their religion, and their way of life.
All those in favor of the communique, please recall that in this committee we've decided to suspend the right of the P5 to veto communiques. 4, 5, 6, 7. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 11, which is a majority. So in this committee, this communique passes.
Motion to close debate.
That is in order. All those in favor of closing debate, please raise your placards now. This motion clearly passes. Good job, you guys. Give yourselves a hand.
I would like to thank everyone in my delegation for taking a part in the debate and making themselves a part of the resolution. Because I think in my past debate, not everyone got a part in our resolution. It was only really the P5 nations. And I think you guys did a really good job making sure that you were a part of the resolution. Thank you.
This is our closing ceremony for a small conference. So I just wanted to leave you guys with a couple thoughts that I felt like were really substantive about something that I think about a lot. The subject of equality. According to a guy named Dr. Nicholas Capaldi, who's an affiliate of the Hoover Institute, the idea of equality is actually pretty new in the world. But in ancient times, equality was not really a concept at all. Equality is a complicated, controversial subject. Neither governments nor people of today, as you may have seen in your respective security councils these past 2 days, agree on what equality actually means and how to bring it about. We are the revolutionaries. We are the hope. But the fact that you are all beginning to see the part you can play in treating everyone as equal is in the great and new tradition of inventing, defining, and creating equality in our world. Thank you.
We basically tried to roll out crises that would test your positions and perhaps show why value systems sometimes can be extremely relative, and I hope you've experienced that. And this is the point of LCM. We believe that young people can do amazing things once they set their minds to it. We do believe that you need sovereignty, independence, and freedom in order to become adults, which is why we try to treat you as such. And with that, thank you very much, dear delegates. Have a wonderful rest of your election cycle. And thank you.